Hello there, and welcome back to yet another Night of the Movies podcast. I'm Spike Knight, and in these podcasts I like talking all things movie and TV, and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, I'm reviewing Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire. But just before I do that, I should say what I say at the start of every podcast I do, which is, if you are watching this podcast on YouTube, hello to my viewers, but you prefer to listen to your podcast on Spotify, well, even look, as you can also listen to this podcast on Spotify at Night of the Movies on that platform. And if you are already listening to this podcast on Spotify, hello there to podcast listeners, then you can also check this podcast out visually. Yes, you can watch this podcast on my YouTube channel at Night of the Movies on that platform as well. Likewise, whatever you may be watching or listening to this podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the podcast, of course, and please leave me with some feedback on things to improve on in future podcasts, because there are always things to improve on, and feedback is, as ever, much appreciated. So let's get into it, shall we? Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire. So this is the fifth film, if I get my details correct, if I get my facts correct. It's the fifth film in the Monsterverse from Warner Brothers. And if you're not familiar with what the Monsterverse is, it's the currently ongoing universe of monster movies, which started with Godzilla 2014 and continued with Kong Skull Island, to Godzilla King of the Monsters, to Godzilla vs. Kong, and to most recently Monarch Legacy of Monsters, the Apple TV Plus series, which came out last year. And this is the newest addition to the Monsterverse. It's the fifth film in the Monsterverse. Yeah, just making sure I got the math correct in my head there. Yeah, it's the fifth film in this Monsterverse. And it's the second film in this Monsterverse to be directed by Adam Wingard, who previously directed the first Godzilla vs. Kong movie, which came out a couple of years ago now, and which I really enjoyed. And as for this film, as for Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire, I was looking forward to this film, but I wouldn't say I was highly anticipating it. I wouldn't say I was terribly excited about seeing it, because even though I am a huge fan of the King Kong character and the Godzilla characters, you know, I have my King Kong Funko Pop figure down here. I mean, just look at that. Got him, it's a huge Funko Pop figure that I got him when the first Godzilla vs. Kong movie came out a couple of years ago now. Same with Godzilla. I've got my large Godzilla Funko Pop toy down here as well. I love Godzilla and King Kong. I love those characters so much. So you would think that I would be very excited about seeing another movie where they were going to be together. You'd think it would be one of my most anticipated movies for this year. But it wasn't. And I'll tell you why. The first Godzilla vs. Kong movie, which came out a couple of years ago, I was deliriously excited about seeing, because the original King Kong vs. Godzilla from 1963, you know, the dubbed version of that film, the original version of that film came out in 1962, but the dubbed version of the Japanese version of, you know, King Kong vs. Godzilla, which came out in 1963, which I said twice now, but the original King Kong vs. Godzilla was a film which was constantly on repeat for me when I was young. I was obsessed with that movie because it was the only movie I knew where King Kong and Godzilla met each other and fought each other, and I loved that film so much. I watched it way too much. I lost count of how many times I watched that film, and when I heard that a modern day take was in production, a modern day version of the King Kong vs. Godzilla, the Godzilla vs. King Kong story was happening, when, you know, Godzilla vs. Kong was announced in 2019, I could not believe it. It felt like a dream had come true. In fact, a dream had come true, because growing up I always wanted to see a modern take on the Godzilla vs. Kong story, and we were going to get it in 2021. In fact, I think the film was meant to come out in 2020, but obviously the pandemic delayed it. And when it eventually came out, I remember going to the cinema to see it, my heart pounding as the film was starting. You saw this, like, what happened with Kong and Godzilla in the previous movies leading up to this one, and I absolutely loved Godzilla vs. Kong the first time I saw it. I've since seen that movie about 4 or 5 more times, and I still really enjoy it. But it's gone down in my liking, and every time I rewatch it, like it was on Netflix, and I think it still is on Netflix, I'm not entirely sure about that, but it was on Netflix for the past couple of months, and I rewatched it on Netflix recently, and I just skipped through all the human parts. I just skipped through all the character interactions, because I don't care about all that. What you want to see in these movies, and what these movies actually really deliver on in the end, is the monster fights, and I thought the monster fights were really great in Godzilla vs. Kong, but I thought all the human stuff was kind of, well, it wasn't great, was it? So, because of that, I wasn't that excited about Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire, because it looked like more of the same. It didn't really look like it was offering up anything new in terms of the human characters. And some people might say, yeah, but I don't mind that, but I personally do, because a sequel needs to do something more than the first film, and this is a sequel to Godzilla vs. Kong. And I don't mean just like, let's throw more monsters into the movie, which this film is clearly doing. I mean, it's called Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire. It's clearly going to have more monsters, but I don't just want to see more monsters. I want to actually care about the human stuff more. And from the trailers for this movie, it didn't look like I was going to get that. It looked like the film was going to be more monster focused, and I didn't love that, especially with Godzilla Minus One only coming out last year as well. Because Godzilla Minus One did it perfectly. It had the character stuff mixed with the story and the narrative, mixed with all the monster stuff perfectly. Like, it all came together in that movie, and what Godzilla represented and how they tied that in with survivor's guilt and everything like that in Godzilla Minus One was just perfect. And after seeing that film, I kind of felt like I didn't really need to see another Godzilla movie, another American-produced Godzilla film. I didn't really feel like I needed to see another one. But I knew this film was coming out this year. I liked the trailers. The trailers made this film look like it was going to be fun, even if it wasn't going to offer up anything to some of them what I hadn't already seen. And I was still looking forward to seeing this film, because it's not every day, it's not every week, it's not every year that you get to see a King Kong or Godzilla movie at the cinema. Let alone a King Kong and a Godzilla movie where they're going to meet and probably fight on screen, and they do again in this film. Because I'm a fan of King Kong and Godzilla movies, both when they're together and when they're separate, I was looking forward to this film, and I went to go and see it yesterday. And the Google plot synopsis, not that anyone really cares for a film like this, but I'm going to say it anyway. The Google plot synopsis for the film goes as follows: Godzilla and the almighty Kong face a colossal threat hidden deep within the planet, challenging their very existence and survival of the human race. How about that? And honestly, I thought this movie was big, dumb, meaningless fun. I enjoy myself whilst watching this film, but this is not a good film. It is not a good movie. It's badly written. You don't care about the characters, again, whatsoever. The ending didn't really make sense to me. The plot, I felt was, I didn't even know there was a plot actually going on in this film whilst I was watching the film. Like, I watched this film, I've watched all 2 hours of Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire, and I did not really realise that the film actually had a plot. I was reading the Google plot synopsis there, I was like, wow, that was a Google plot synopsis, because I did not get that when I was actually experiencing the film at the cinema yesterday. And there was so many things wrong with this movie, so many things wrong with it. Some of the CGI looks rushed, the ending didn't make any sense to me, the ending felt rushed. I was like, what the hell was that? And it's not a film I'm going to return to anytime soon, and it doesn't offer anything that much more than the first Godzilla vs. Kong, which came out a couple of years ago, did. But I enjoyed watching all the monsters fight on screen, which I know isn't the thing you should say in a review. I know you should sit and go, well, the film, the narrative wasn't as engaging, or it wasn't as compelling, and the characters weren't as drawn out. I know you should say all that, and I do say all that in my reviews, but at the same time, sometimes you just want to go to the cinema, turn your brain off, and watch two monsters fight. Especially at the cinema, you know? Because how many times, again, as what he said, do you get to see a Godzilla or a Kong movie, or Godzilla and Kong movie at the cinema? And when I was watching them two on screen, I was smiling from ear to ear, because the inner child of me was thinking, you remember King Kong versus Godzilla? I remember watching that so many times as a kid? Well, now there's a sequel to the remake, to the reimagining, to the modern day take on the Godzilla vs. Kong story. I'm watching that sequel. The sequel isn't totally working, but look, Godzilla's on screen and he's fighting Kong, and Kong's on screen and Kong's got a kid in this film, and Kong basically becoming a father in this film made me smile a lot. Honestly, the addition of Kong's son in this film is brilliant. Because Kong's son in this film, although it's not actually his biological son, but his surrogate son in this film, is one of the best additions to the Monsterverse, period. Every single time Kong's son was on screen, I was grinning from ear to ear. That is a menacing little beast, but it's also the best addition to the film, and it's brilliant. I love that Kong basically becomes a father in this movie. If they make another film in the Monsterverse, which it looks like they're going to because the film blew up the box office over Easter weekend, if they make another film in this Monsterverse, make it about Kong being a father. I want to see that story more than anything else. And that's another reason I enjoyed this film. Plus, Adam Wingard, what I like about him as a director on these monster movies, he did it with Godzilla vs. Kong, and he does it again here. He places these monsters in locations, and he makes these monsters. He gets these monsters doing these things we haven't seen them done in previous movies. At least I haven't seen them done in previous films. I'm not aware that they've actually done, like it's being revealed in the trailers. There's a scene in this film where Godzilla and Kong fight each other by the pyramids. And I never thought I was going to see that in a Godzilla or Kong movie. And I was grinning from ear to ear when it was happening. Godzilla jumping off a cliff into the ocean made me laugh out loud, but in a way that I didn't care. I didn't care about the stupidity of it. I just ate it all up. There were sequences in this film where Godzilla is swimming from one location to another location. He's going through these rivers in these cities, and he's just destroying bridges second by second, as if nobody is on those bridges. He's just swimming through rivers and destroying bridges, and I love that. It's something I haven't seen in a Godzilla movie previously, and it's something I got here. Kong basically becomes a father, something I hadn't seen in a previous King Kong movie, and then seeing Godzilla and Kong team up to fight this evil King Kong, seeing Kong, because Scar, the villain in this film, is basically an evil version of King Kong. Seeing Kong face off against species which are just like him. I mean, all these things. There's so many other parts of the film. I mean, like the Ice Godzilla, things you wanted to see in a Godzilla vs. Kong film, or a movie which includes Godzilla and Kong, because this isn't really a Godzilla vs. Kong film. Although they do fight in this movie, so, still. But anyway, things that you've always wanted to see in a Godzilla and Kong movie, you get in this film, and something I really like about Adam Wingard as director is he just does things with these monsters. He gets these monsters doing things that you haven't seen them do before, and that's something I think he does really well as director of these monster films. I don't think his storytelling is particularly great, and I don't think his directing is particularly brilliant. Like, when Kong roars in these films, I want to feel that. I want to feel every time he roars, like I do in Peter Jackson's King Kong, which is still my favourite monster movie of all time. And you don't feel that. I don't think these films are that well directed, but I like Adam Wingard's vision. You can tell he's having fun making these films. And also, this film felt a little more tongue-in-cheek than the last Godzilla vs. Kong. There was more parts of the film where I was like, yeah, they know what they're doing. They know how silly this film is, and they're leaning into that. Like, there's a scene at one point where Rebecca Hall's character and Brian Henry character are in a room together, and they're just talking about what's happening, why Godzilla is roaming about the Earth. And then the scene is cut short because Rebecca Hall's character just says, "Oh, Godzilla's coming." And it felt more like Adam Wingard knew that the human characters were dispensable, and that the thing that people really want to see, and the things that these films deliver on, are the monster fights. And I do think Adam Wingard did a decent job making this film. I don't think it's that well directed, but I like what he does with these movies. I like how he shows these monsters in locations and doing things we haven't seen them do before. Plus, this film, one thing it did do better than the last Godzilla vs. Kong film. I still think the last Godzilla vs. Kong film is better, but one thing this film does do superior, one thing this film is superior for, is focusing more on the relationship between this deaf girl and Kong. You saw that in the last Godzilla vs. Kong, and it was probably the best part of that film. Like, genuinely, I'm not being sarcastic, the best part of the last Godzilla vs. Kong movie was Kong's relationship with this deaf girl, and that is more the centre of this film. I like how they focused on that more, and going back into that whole thing, it's more tongue-in-cheek. Dan Stevens, he plays a character, a new addition to the Monsterverse. He's not appeared, as far as I'm aware, in any previous movies or TV shows in this Monsterverse. He comes in there. He basically plays a dentist for Kong. And as soon as he came on screen, I was like, he understands the assignment. Like, he just gets what these movies are about. He gets that he's dispensable, but you can tell he's having fun, and I like the addition of that character. The thing is about these movies, yeah, the characters are dispensable, but they're all likeable to watch, whether it's Rebecca Hall's character, Brian Tyree Henry's character, Dan Stevens' character, or the deaf girl. They're all fun to watch, and they're all likeable. None of them are horrible to watch on screen. Otherwise, these movies would be unwatchable. They'd be unbearable, but actually, the human characters, they're fun to watch. And you can tell that all the actors are having fun making this movie. It does sometimes feel like Adam Wingard is behind the camera going, don't worry, it's just a Godzilla vs. Kong film. You guys do whatever you want. The people are really coming for the monsters. And it feels like the actors know that, you know. And I like the characters in this film. They're all completely dispensable, and there's nothing really to any of them, unlike the characters in Godzilla -1, but they're not horrible to watch. And the film does have a good heart in the relation between Rebecca Hall's character and this deaf girl, which is something you don't always get in a Godzilla or a Kong movie. You didn't get that in Godzilla King of the Monsters or in Godzilla 2014. Or even really in Godzilla vs. Kong, although you got that a bit in the relation between Kong and this deaf girl, but actually there is a more heart in the relation between the human characters. Still, the human characters, completely dispensable. And also, the needle drops in this film don't really work. Like, this film has quite a few needle drops of 80s songs, great 80s songs at that, but they feel rushed. Like, at one point, I Was Made for Loving You by Kiss, which is a great song, comes in, you know, the needle drops with that song, and I was like, yes, this is a great song, and I never thought I'd hear it in a Godzilla and Kong movie, but here we go. I'm hearing a bit of Kiss, and my favourite Kiss song at that, but it's only used for like 30 seconds, and it doesn't feel needed. It didn't feel like, I don't know, it felt out of place, and it felt rushed. I didn't love the needle drops in this one, and I'm somebody who usually loves a good needle drop, especially when it's of great tunes from the 80s, the 70s, the 60s, or the 90s, or whatever. But the needle drops here didn't totally work, and that was another thing which I did think could have been improved on. And the writing in this film is all over the place. It's trying to deliver messages in parts which it didn't really need to, and there were so many moments when I was sitting there and I was laughing at what was going on. I was laughing at all these plot conveniences, all this stupidity, and I couldn't quite believe that this film had 3 writers. I think when the credits were taking place at the start of the film, I was like, wow, this film had 3 writers? Wow, I mean, let's see how well the film is written, and it's not written well whatsoever. So I'm kind of surprised this film had 3 writers. And again, it's not a good movie. It really isn't. It's too long. Some of the CGI is wobbly, which you don't really want in a movie like this, which is so CGI focused. And the musical score sound like pseudo Hans Zimmer. It's from Junkie XL, who actually worked, I think he's one of the people who Hans Zimmer trained, and the musical score here is just, you know, it's nothing special. There's nothing about this film which is really that good. But I had a good time watching it because I like these characters. I like seeing Godzilla on screen. I like seeing Kong on screen. And I'm being completely frank, if I saw this at home, I think I might have hated it. But I saw this in a cinema, and just seeing that spectacle, seeing Godzilla and Kong fight each other, the pyramids, seeing Scar and Kong fight each other, seeing this Ice Godzilla do some stuff, seeing Kong fight some of his own species. I mean, it's things which shouldn't really work and probably wouldn't work for me on a TV screen, but they work for me in a cinema. And as for how this film ranks amongst the other movies in this current Monsterverse, so as already mentioned, that's Godzilla 2014, Kong Skull Island, Godzilla King of the Monsters, and the first Godzilla vs. Kong. I do think this is the weakest movie of all of those films. Actually, I might prefer over Godzilla King of the Monsters, because Godzilla King of the Monsters felt a little too serious for my liking. But this film did feel more tongue-in-cheek, and it felt more like Adam Wingard knew the assignment. He knew what sort of movie he was making. So I probably do prefer over that, although I do think it's on the weaker end of the movies in this current Monsterverse. And I do think they need to make better movies in this Monsterverse if they want it to continue for longer. Then again, if these movies make money, what do I know? Because, you know, people are still going to see them. That's what he said. This movie blew up the box office over the Easter weekend. So maybe they don't need to make good movies. Maybe they just need to make more of these films with loads more monsters. But yeah, I do think this is on the weaker end. And if I was to rank the films, I still think the best movie of this current Monsterverse is Kong Skull Island. Then I think I'd probably say Godzilla 2014, although I don't think that's a great Godzilla film. It's a good monster movie, I just don't think it's a great Godzilla film. But if I'm ranking it, if I'm going to do my own personal ranking, Kong Skull Island is still number one. The more I watch that and the more I think about the film, the more I like it. Number two, it would probably be Godzilla vs. Kong in terms of enjoyment, simply for the monster fights. Then it would be Godzilla 2014. Then it would be Godzilla x Kong The New Empire. And then it would be Godzilla King of the Monsters. With the exception of with the exception of Kong Skull Island, I don't think any of these movies have been great. But you never know. You know, maybe I think they should do another Kong-focused film. I don't think they should do another Godzilla vs. Kong movie for the next installment in this Monsterverse. I think they should do another Kong movie, Kong-focused film, and maybe that could be even better than Kong Skull Island. Do, you know, Kong and His Son the movie. That's a terrible title, don't call it that. But do Kong and His Son the movie, and I genuinely think that could be quite a good film if it's done right. But at the same time, I don't think that's where they're going to go. And yeah, this Monsterverse hasn't been great, but I'm still going to watch the movies, and I do really like Kong Skull Island, and I'm glad this Monsterverse exists, because it's something I always wanted when I was a kid. And now they're finally doing it, and even so not all the movies are really working, there's something about them which makes them at least fun to watch if you're a fan of these characters. As I already said, it's big, dumb, meaningless fun. There is nothing to this film. Nothing to it whatsoever. It's a bad movie. And it's dumb. And it's big. And it does feel sometimes big for the sake of being big. Like, there are parts of the film that's like, why do we need this? Why do we need to see Godzilla... Not Godzilla, sorry. Why do we need to see Kong riding Godzilla? I was about to say Godzilla riding Kong. Now that's something I want to see in the next Godzilla vs. Kong movie, if they make one, which they probably will. But why do we need to see Kong riding Godzilla? We don't. But we do because, you know, why not? And this film, it is just... I mean, it's rubbish, but it's fun rubbish. And as somebody who enjoys watching these two characters on screen, and because these two characters hold a special place in my heart after rewatching that original King Kong vs. Godzilla constantly when I was a kid, I was entertained by this film. But I do wish it was better, and I do wish it actually did more and actually improved on the first film. Showed us more and did us more. Now until he just did more than the first one. But, you know, it is what it is. As what he said twice, and as I'm going to say once again, Godzilla x Kong The New Empire is big, dumb, meaningless fun. And so for that reason, I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. I'm giving it a 6 out of 10 because I give films I just find enjoyable a 6 out of 10 or above. And I found this just about enjoyable. I mean, it did get to a point where I was like, how many people are dying in this monster battle. There is nothing about human tragedy in the amount of people that are dying in these cities, whilst Godzilla and Kong are fighting each other, whilst other monsters are there too, fighting them. Because the end fight in this film, God knows how many people must have died in this world where the film takes place, where the big monster fight is taking place at that. And plus, this film is a it's a complete opposite to Monarch, Legacy of the Monster, the last thing to come out of this Monsterverse. Like, that show, I didn't think it was brilliant, but it focused on the human characters, and it was pretty good. It was like, you barely saw the monsters in that show, and when you did, it was because they had to narratively work with what was going on in that series, and also probably because of the budget. But here, it's like the complete opposite. The human characters, don't worry about them. The monsters are the things you want to see. It's a complete opposite to Monarch, Legacy of the Monsters. It does not feel like it's part of that world. And it does feel now like they're just doing whatever they want with these movies. But you know what? They're fun. And they're fun for people like me who are Godzilla and Kong fans. So that's good enough, you know? It's good enough to watch at the cinema, but I probably won't be watching. I do think the first Godzilla vs. Kong is better, but again, it's fun. This movie, it's entertaining if you like those two kites on screen. I mean, it's rubbish, but it's brainless entertainment. And, you know, sometimes that's okay to watch in the cinema. So that's pretty much my thoughts on Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire. Honestly, the more I think about this film, the more my mind starts to go numb. So I'm going to round off this review by saying once more that it's Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire is, what did I say? Big, dumb, meaningless fun. And so for that reason, I'm going to say once more that this movie is a 6 out of 10 from me. Anyway, guys, that's it for today's podcast. If you have seen Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire and you loved it, that's great. Please let me know why in the comment section below. Or maybe you watched the film and absolutely despised it and thought it was the worst movie of 2024 so far. Whatever your thoughts are on this film, please let me know in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching or listening to this podcast. And if you haven't yet, please do click down below and like and subscribe on this podcast. Why? Because it makes me happier, and also because you will be updated whenever I release a new podcast in the near distant future. And on that, as we said, thank you so much for watching or listening to these podcasts. And I suppose is it. So I will see you guys again soon. But bye for now. Bye.